Thanks, Chant. I mean, the thing is that I've actually been trying for the last 3 years to get some political buy-in to this by organizing a roundtable of MPs on, particularly on the issue of clean air, which I've been doing in Delhi for the last 3 years. And it's been difficult in our politics to get enough bipartisan involvement. But this year, for the first time, the environment minister himself attended, and we're trying to broaden the base, because one of the startling things about the entire air quality issue in India is how low is the salience politically. People don't win elections or lose elections because of air quality issues, and politicians just don't give it the importance we need. I saw my good friend Helen Clark talking about how shocking it was that in so many places the air quality was 2.5 times the WHO limit. Right now in Delhi, it's 304, which is 12 times the WHO limit, and that's a good day by our standards. If you look at the official India Air Quality Service announcements, you've got a category called good, then there's satisfactory, there's moderate, there's poor, there's very poor, there's severe, and there's emergency level of severity. Well, 2/3 of the winter days in Delhi are between severe and emergency. And the crisis is so serious that we're talking about, I mean, if you want a really startling datum, air pollution kills a child every 3 minutes in India. Every 3 minutes, an Indian child is dying because of our air. It's as dramatic as that. And the fact is that urban smoke, so just the cities, we've had 1.24 million people dying. Now, I've listened also to my good friends N.K. Singh and Sering Togbe, who've said very important things, but they actually, even some of the things they pointed to as solutions, also point to the intractability of the problems. N.K., for example, on the crop stubble burning, where I entirely empathize with what you said, it's interesting that it was the environmentalists who actually asked for the planting in Punjab and Haryana to be delayed by a month.
Correct.
It was actually an example of a good intention going wrong. Because the environmentalists said, listen, the water table is too low, you can't use up all this water, let's delay the planting by law. And they did. And now 20 years later, we have a crisis because the entire pattern has changed of when they plant and when they harvest. Sering, you were talking about the gas cylinders. Wonderful initiative, but only the first cylinder is free. And 92% of the beneficiaries have not been able to afford refills. So when Julie says, you can dream without money, but to act, you actually have to have money, that's part of the problem. If the government could afford to give every person below the poverty line who's cooking on wood or cow dung or whatever, a gas cylinder and renew it every time at reasonable intervals, so they're not selling them on the black market, then it might work, but it won't work if you're giving it once. Sorry, I apologize, I was leaning away from the mic. So the issues with all of these things are getting political buy-in and getting implementation, effective implementation with adequate resources of the solutions we need. We haven't made progress, even though we have a colossal amount of damage to our economy, to our GDP estimates, in terms of not just direct consequences like deaths, but also lost labor productivity, hospitalizations, sick days, all of that. Ranges from 7.5 to 8.6% of India's GDP. So it's a huge knock on our economy. And in Delhi, the worst thing is children, because we're looking at a situation in which an estimated half of our 4.5 million children actually have irreversible lung damage. That's 50% of the children in Delhi. And where a study by a very reputable institute from Calcutta demonstrates that children in Delhi actually have incidents of serious respiratory illness that are about 4 times the level of any other city in India, and that's the national capital. We have to learn, obviously, what others did. The Chinese, for example, took some very bold steps. I think many of us have been to China when they occupied those first few slots in the world's worst polluted cities. Now that we have supplanted them, what can we learn from how Beijing went from first to whatever it is now, 100th or 90th or whatever. And amongst the things they took required very, very tough political decisions. I mean, there is no question, for example, that switching out of coal is going to be incredibly expensive and painful for India. A measure of which being that you talked about the national clean air policy, but the national energy policy has just affirmed new infusions of resources into thermal energy in this country, and coal, our dependence on coal is actually increasing, not decreasing. The Chinese actually did take steps to reduce sulfur dioxide in Beijing by 70% and particle pollution by 36%. And they switched their coal-powered industry and power in the Beijing area to systems run on natural gas. That would cost us a fortune, and I don't think the government responsibly, particularly in times of fiscal deficits and so on, is going to be able to find the resources for that. So if you're going to continue spewing coal-fired smoke into the air, how are you going to overcome this? There are other major issues, some of which, for example, there's now the Transport Ministry is taking very specific steps on phasing out older cars, requiring other kinds of progress. But as a politician, at the risk of sounding cynical, I'm going to say, when a government in 2015 announces a target for 2030, you can be sure they're not going to lift a finger to fulfill it, because in 2030, neither the minister who made the promise nor the government he represents is likely to be around. And that's simple political reality. You set a target far off enough that it doesn't become your fault when it's not fulfilled. These are genuine challenges, because Beijing has been boasting now, impressively, that 20 million residents in Beijing will live an estimated 3.3 years longer because of the measures they've taken over the last 10 years. I mean, I'd love to be able to say that about the residents of Delhi as well, not least because I and friends I care for are living here. I'm not sure I want them to have a shorter lifespan. But the difficulty is, how do we raise it up the political ladder? I'm very glad that we have here representatives of more than, how many political parties are we? I count at least 3 around the table. And I certainly hope that we will see more salience. It's gradually climbed up because the media finally woke up to the whole Diwali pollution crisis, when at the time of a major festival in India, which is usually marked by firecrackers, we ended up with particularly unbreathable air. Today is 304 AQI, PM 2.5. Diwali, it peaked over 1,000. In fact, it couldn't be measured beyond 1,000, so it may have been well beyond. And that's the kind of crisis we've had to face. So I'm not the resident pessimist. I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. I'd like to see N.K. Singh's financial incentives work. I'd like to see setting Topge's hope and optimism work. I'd like to see Helen's concern about how we can get the poor to live better lives so they can avoid all of this work. But I just want to point out to the obstacles, because there is an enormous level of international commitment also required to make this work, which includes things like helping transfer green technologies at next to no cost to developing countries. That isn't happening. And it's not happening because Western countries who have these technologies tend to say that they are in the private sector and therefore governments can't transfer them. You will have to work out your own arrangements with the private sector, and that may well be...
Shashi, I'll have to ask you to conclude. We have a number of other speakers as well.
That's the last point. So my worry is, how do we get enough international buy-in and resources to supplement national buy-in and resources so we can actually get some progress on what otherwise seems to me an intractable problem. Thanks.
Thank you.